All right, welcome back, early birds. We still have a while before we get started. My computer's still on Pacific time, so don't let that throw you. But what I have here is something that I created in Excel called the Radical Russ drug test. It's the only drug test that's fun to pass. And y'all know Jeopardy, right? You've seen Jeopardy. You know how that basically works. Well, we have a Jeopardy board here with 6 different categories: Sensimilla Science, Pot and Politics, Viper Sports, that's marijuana and sports, Virginia Reform, 4 and 20. All the questions will have to do with the number 420 in some way, and Reefer Music, which is musicians and bands and such. But my Jeopardy is a little bit different. It's not give me the answer and do the question thing, and it's not for money. As you'll notice, we are playing for weed. So questions start at swag. So you can get a bag of swag. A swag question will be a true-false question that's so easy that if you miss it, people should laugh at you. Okay? So start with the swag. Then you get a question that's an eighth. An eighth question is a true-false question. A quarter is a multiple choice. It'll be ABC multiple choice. A half ounce is an ABCD question, usually where you have to put them in order. So it's a little harder. A 1 ounce question is one where you have to give the direct answer. A 2 ounce question is one where there's a list of answers. For example, name 3 legal states, right? That could be one, right? And then the quarter pound question is the hardest possible question on the board. It usually stumps anybody that tries it. So the way we're gonna do this, normally do it with teams and have one against the other, but right now it's just kind of loosey-goosey. I have a normal grinder. Now give this away to the first person who can answer an ounce worth of questions. You can answer 1 ounce question, 2 half ounce questions, 4 quarters, 8 eighths, combination thereof. Who'd like to give it a try? And you get to pick the topic. Want to give it a shot? All right, so we got, it's Daniel. Okay, so Daniel, pick your category and your weight. Pot and politics for an ounce. Who is the current, this is no longer true after January 20th, who was the current president of the US Senate who ushered in mandatory minimum sentence in the 80s and wrote the bill creating the drug czar's office? That is correct, Joe Biden, architect of the drug war. All right, so you win that question. We're gonna put you in team Pot and Politics for an ounce. Okay, so you are team Indica. All right, who else would like to win a prize? Jen Michelle's got the prizes, so I don't know what the prizes will be from this point on, but no try? Okay. Viper Sports? A quarter. Viper Sports for a quarter. The World Anti-Doping Agency recently raised its threshold for a positive urine test for marijuana metabolites to what level? 5 nanograms, 15 nanograms, or 150 nanograms per milliliter? B15. The answer, 150. Oh, 150. Yeah, it was 15. And then they raised it from 15 to 150 because they were catching too many athletes that weren't high. And they said, that's not what we want to do. So since that Viper Sports for a quarter, unfortunately, that one goes to the man. All right. Who else would like to try? Any takers? Give it a shot. Sensimilla Science for an ounce. According to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, what percentage of voting age American adults use marijuana monthly? Give me an integer within 1%. American adults, voting age, 18 and older. 25% of Americans. I want to live where you live, man. It's 7.6% of the United States adults use marijuana monthly. That's what's reported. Actually, the question should be phrased, how many people report that they use marijuana? That's true. That's true. So unfortunately, we will have to give that Sensimilla Science ounce to the man. All right, another taker. Reefer Music for swag. Which instrument is stonier, a sitar or an accordion? A sitar, obviously. All right, so you have picked up the swag, which is worth an 1/8 ounce, and you can continue because you still have the board. What's next? What's that? Oh, no, just to keep track of who's who here, but Steve for now. So next question. A quarter of reefer music? Which of these 1960s pop icons recorded an anti-marijuana public service ad? Jim Morrison, Sonny Bono, or Neil Sedaka? B, Sonny Bono. And that's true. And it's hilarious. It was recorded in 1968. It is hilarious. All right, so you got yourself a quarter. So you are currently up to 3/8 of an ounce on your way to winning a prize. Pick again. Half? Okay. Half in reefer music. Put these famous marijuana songs in chronological order from the earliest to the latest. Gin and Juice by Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, Don't Bogart Me by the Fraternity of Man, Mary Jane by Rick James, and Sweet Leaf by Black Sabbath. D, B, C, A. D, no. B, D, C, A. Close. Bogart was 68, Sweet Leaf was 71. All right, so that one has to go to the man. And now we get to turn the board over to somebody else trying to win a prize. Go ahead, give it a shot. 4 and 20 for swag. 4 divided by 20 is wrong. 4 divided by 20 is 0.2. 20 divided by 4 is 5. So that one goes to the man. We have to have another candidate who wants to pick. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. 4 and 20 for how much? For a quarter? Which of the following is the Roman numeral for 420? B, IVXX. Nope, CDXX. C is 100, D is 500, CD is 500 minus 100, XX is 20. But IV is 4, and XX is 20, but 420, yeah, different thing. So we'll give that to the man. Who's up? Give it a shot. Virginia reform for a quarter. Which of the following is true about Virginia's limited medical marijuana law? CBD oil for epilepsy protected for arrest, CBD oil for treating epilepsy at dispensaries, CBD oil with the most THC allowed in any other CBD oil state. Yeah. Let's see. C. Virginia's law allows oils of greater than 15% CBD, less than THC. Georgia also has a 5% CBD thing. So there we go. All right. As it can be. All right, let's go back to, let's run back to Daniel here and give you a chance to pick another one. Four and 20 for an 1/8. Johnny has loaded 16 pounds of Humboldt buds for the Bay Area hash makers into his pickup at 4:20 p.m. in Redding, California. Assuming he obeys Steinborn's rule, only breaking one law at a time, can he make it to San Francisco, 217 miles away, in time for 7:10 p.m.? Math. Like 217. No, he cannot make it. Trip takes 3 hours and 15 minutes. Congratulations. And that was 4 and 20 for an 1/8. All right, let's give that to Indica and pick again. For how much? 1/8 of Cincinnati Science. True or false? Holding your marijuana hits for longer than 5 seconds reduces harm because you'll get higher with less smoking. That is false. Nearly all the THC you inhale is absorbed by your lungs within 3 seconds. Holding it any longer just gets more smoke and tar in your lungs. Okay, so that sends me a science for an 8th. Oh, you know what? I just remembered you've already won something. Let's pick another person, give a chance to win. Go ahead. Okay. Sports for an 8th. True or false, the NBA randomly drug tests for marijuana use in the offseason? False. Because the NBA would like to have enough players to man a team. So yeah, we'll give you the sports one. And we'll give that to Indica so you already get a head start. So yeah, pick again. What's that? Yeah, probably somewhere in there. I'll find it. All right, so next question. Keep going. You still have the board. Go on. Reefer music for an ounce. While perhaps best known for Hello Dolly and What a Wonderful World, this jazz trumpeter was also one of the first American celebrities to openly celebrate marijuana use. That's right, Louis Satchmo Armstrong. That's right. All right, so there we go. That takes us up to the top of the hour. That's a little bit of the Radical Russ drug test. This works in Microsoft Excel. It's all macro-based, and you can add your own questions to it. It's got an entire page of instructions right here. It tells you how to run the thing, how to work it, all the details. All the questions are in the back. You can add more if you want to. Tons of stuff in there. And so you can use this for, meetings or gatherings or whatever you want to use it for, just to brush up your own knowledge on this stuff. If you'd like a copy of it, just email me. I'm radicalruss@gmail.com, and I'll send you a copy of this file. And you can use it any way you like. Also wanted to remind you that I'm live streaming this event on my YouTube page, which is youtube.com/radicalruss. And you'll be able to get, it's archived already. In fact, this morning's stuff is already up on my page. The resolution's not so good because it's hotel Wi-Fi, but the audio's there so you can at least hear. All right, let's bring back our good friend Jen Michelle, just to introduce who's coming up next. Because I'm not sure which order you're doing things. Okay. Nikki's next.
Okay, so don't get too excited because it's just a few housekeeping items that I need to go over with you guys. I'm a nerd for details, so it might not be a lot of fun. I just wanted to let you know a little of the reason behind the scheduling from this point on. We had to give our speakers a little bit of leeway because they couldn't give us an exact time that they could be here. So we're just kind of playing it by ear. That's why I'm kind of filling in this gap. A couple of things. Denver Riggleman, if you looked on your agenda, that he is a gubernatorial candidate. He is a Republican. His aunt is in the hospital with a very serious brain bleed, so he is sending a surrogate to speak on his behalf. Another thing is I brought in these endocannabinoid books. You guys probably saw them out there. What we're doing for this, we'd like to leave as many of these behind with our legislators tomorrow on Lobby Day. So we're asking kind of as a fundraiser if you could donate some money towards the cost of this to help us absorb what we're paying for these. Suggested donation price is $10. So as many donations as we get would really be helpful so that we can stock these. We don't quite have enough for every legislator, so that's our goal, to get enough for every legislator. Okay, next thing. Okay, silent auction. Guys, make sure you take the time to go and look at all the items. There are a lot of great packages there. You can pull the items out, hold them up, look at them, ask any questions. They're manning the table if you have any questions about the products. We are obviously a nonprofit. We run strictly on donations, and what we make don't sell things, but we take donations in kind. And so that is a way that you can help. If you can't be here tomorrow for Lobby Day, or if you can't join the group in the manner like full-time like a lot of us do, it's very important to understand that every donation that you give to us goes to our cause and helps support everything that it costs the money to put on this conference, to educate you, the money to educate our legislators, and that's a very important way that you help in addition to lobbying. We are going to hand out a survey. We don't have it right now. Duane is on his way back, but yep, he's working on it. I'd like for you to fill that out, every single one of you, so we can have that feedback. Just make sure that you turn it in before you leave today. And our first speaker that's coming up whenever he gets here is Glenn Davis. He is a delegate in the House that has put up a Crohn's bill, and one that's very, very important to me. I'm probably going to cry because every time I talk about it, it's still very raw. And so he is a Republican, one of two that we have speaking today. I would just ask, as a Republican myself, this is a nonpartisan effort. I ask that you keep that in mind when question and answer comes up. Please be respectful. This really isn't, these are guys that are on our side. So there's no reason to hound them or badger them while Republicans are so slow coming over to this issue. So just keep that in mind for me. I would appreciate it. I've spent a lot of time and effort developing these relationships so that they feel comfortable having these conversations, and especially these people not only having the conversation with me, but being willing to come out publicly as a legislator in our favor. So I think that's it for me. And then I just have two people that need to fill out a parking pass. Robert? Yeah, you. See, I told you that wasn't very fun, was it? Okay, I'm done.
We still, oh, we're just waiting for the, okay. Yep, that's fine. No, that's. Oh. All right. Well, it looks like we're going to move ahead as previously planned. So please welcome to our podium here Glenn Davis, State Delegate from Virginia Beach. We'll have you here.
Morning. Oh, I never knew a politician that needed one of these, so. Well, I appreciate the chance to be here with y'all today. You know, this is a little different for me. You know, all of us come to Washington, when you go up there and they have different interests, specialties, and backgrounds. And the same thing when we go to Richmond. None of us are experts in everything. You know, we all have our different unique specialties or things we've learned through life experiences. Mine happens to be business. So you can imagine, you know, when I go to Richmond for the first time 4 years ago and realize just how deep and in depth we get into different topics, everything from education and healthcare and transportation and all these different things. And some get very, very complex. And then you realize, well, now there's 2,000 bills over 60 days that come in front of you, and you're going through this, and you realize, you know, there's some bills that, you know, maybe, you know, make a difference on some people, and maybe there's some bills that I'm not quite sure, you know, who they may impact. And then there's some bills that, honestly, they dramatically change a person's life. And that's what happened to me last year when I started having conversations around the medical use of marijuana and cannabis oil. You see, we all know people that have been affected with different diseases that have been put on different drugs. And as I learned very quickly with the help of a number of people, that those drugs aren't the safest drugs to be put on. You hear about opioid addiction and how that leads into heroin, and then you hear about other alternatives that have been used in different places that are able to take people off those drugs. And then you realize that sometimes what really happens in other areas like Virginia right now is there's just that people being scared, there's that fear, there's that lack of understanding and that lack of education. And so what I'm excited to share with you today is how I've made my progression to not only being thrilled to work with your organization on some of these pieces of legislation like I have today, but also how you can help continue that progression with others like me here in Richmond. You see, it really is sometimes just a misunderstanding or a lack of education on what really is out there. because we all have different backgrounds. None of us walk in there knowing everything about every topic that comes in, and sometimes there's that scariness of making the wrong decision. So for me, it was pretty simple. You see, I didn't know anything about marijuana. It was interesting. I grew up kind of being that goody-goody a little bit. I thought you couldn't really be anything successful in life if you made bad decisions, and obviously that was before Bill Clinton. But as I served in city council and different topics kind of popped up there, and then came to Richmond, I realized, there are win-win solutions sometimes. It's not always about the two extremes. It's not the hard no, or we have to go all the way over here and hit the other extreme and legalize everything on day one. Sometimes there's those baby steps in place, and sometimes those baby steps make big differences in people's lives. And as I was introduced to probably people just like yourselves who have stories of how you or your family or your friends have been impacted by the laws we have in Virginia surrounding the medical use of marijuana. That's what makes the biggest difference. I can tell you that if it wasn't for Nikki and others, I wouldn't be here today. I can read a book. I can look at studies. And we all know that sometimes studies can be biased, and it all comes down to, was this done, or did they already have an outcome they were trying to prove? But what isn't biased, what isn't fake, what isn't slanted is people's real life stories. And that's what made the difference for me. And at that point, had me go down this rabbit hole of, let me see if I can truly understand what is at stake here. Is it really something that we need to get a hold of and change? And that's what changed my impact and my thoughts and made me go down there, because I realized as much as we do get involved in these other 2,000 bills every year that pop up, it's the bills that really change a person's life dramatically and change their opportunities for them and their family that truly mean the most. So it was that obligation that I felt to really get to the bottom of it. And the more I started to do research, the more I realized there is an issue here. And there's a lot of people like me that just were not educated on what truly is kind of the impacts of some of the drugs that are being used today and different things, and the true help and opportunity that some things like cannabis oil that I'm working on now really can bring to impact. And so that's really why the message I want to impart today, because as much as we can read things in Richmond, and you're going to be doing your lobbying tomorrow, it really is sharing the stories of you, your loved ones, your family, your friends, that's going to make the biggest difference. Because all of us in the General Assembly, we're all people. We all have brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, parents, daughters, sons. And all of us, very easily, whenever we're hearing stories, the first thing most of us do is we picture, what if it was our wife, or our husband, our child? And that's what really hit me, and I think that's what hits a lot of people. And that's what causes people to start looking down that rabbit hole and saying, is there something there that we're just missing? And have we just not really opened up the community to see what the true opportunities are? So that's what I wanted to impart with you today as you go into tomorrow. Where we are on my legislation, and I want to share a little bit about that with you. When I talked about, sometimes it's baby steps. It's finding those opportunities that create a story that has people look a little bit deeper. And with me, it was the stories I heard around Crohn's disease. I had a very good friend of mine growing up that had Crohn's, so I was somewhat familiar with it already. And I didn't know the true amount of drugs and the impacts of a lot of these drugs, and until I started looking at this a little bit more when I was contacted by some people before this session. So we wrote a bill, and we said, okay, we already allow cannabis oil for epilepsy. Why wouldn't we allow cannabis oil for Crohn's disease? And as I've been learning a little bit more, a lot of the drugs are the same for both, and obviously we've already made the decision that cannabis oil is better than some of those drugs that were being used for epilepsy. So because they're being used for cannabis, why wouldn't we allow the same thing? So that's where that bill is. It's drafted. It's not very broad. I actually thought, do we need a broader bill? I was advised not to do a broader bill, which I'm glad I didn't. Because after talking to the chairman of the Courts of Justice yesterday, he said, Glenn, here's the 3 things that have to be shown for us to expand this. And Dave Alba is a good friend of mine. He's a great guy. He's very direct, which I can appreciate. And the first is that we have to prove that there are studies that say this helps. And those studies are out there. We've all seen them, that cannabis oil makes a difference. So we have to have those. And I've been working with many people to help put those studies together so we can supply those. The second thing that we have to show is that there are doctors that say this medical science makes sense, that this truly is something that they want to prescribe. And that gets to be a little bit difficult, you see, because not all doctors specialize in Crohn's disease, and not all doctors specialize or understand the value of cannabis oil with regards to Crohn's disease. So trying to pull that medical expertise into a committee room on a given day on arguably sometimes 24 to 48 hours notice can be a little bit difficult. That's the second thing we have to prove. But the third thing, and this is the most important thing that we have to prove, is that the other solutions out there are not working. They're not solutions that are making a difference in people's lives, or they're so terrible that it's something that we should be avoiding if there was an alternative. And that's where all you come in. You see, I've been reading the online WebMD. I've always told people to stay away from WebMD because every time I look at it when I have a cold, I think I'm dying. But I have to tell you that it's coming in handy now because I can go and look up all these medicines and get the truth about what the side effects are. But once again, when I'm able to talk to people that have been taking them and they share the impacts of what they've experienced, that's where that gets overcome. And to prove that this oil, this cannabis oil, doesn't have the side effects of all these drugs and really makes a difference in people's lives. And in this case, in many cases, it's the difference between life and death. Or the difference between being able to be functional and be able to take care of your children and not. And so that's what convinced me. That's where we're at today with regards to the bill. I hope it does move forward. I think we have a lot of open-minded people on the committee. But whatever success that we've experienced up to this date has been because of y'all. And whatever success that we'll experience as we continue to move forward in the session will be because of y'all. It's really sharing your stories and being at conferences like this that truly help educate a lot of us that have never thought about this issue before, understand what the true opportunities are. So I appreciate this opportunity. I know we're going to do some Q&A, and I look forward to that. But thank you for having me. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for helping me understand the true opportunities and what really we're facing today with these opportunities. Thank you so much. I'd like to, I guess we open up any questions that we may. Yes, ma'am. Oh, wonderful.
For epilepsy, and now so you mentioned that the oil has been approved for epilepsy, and now you have a bill out for Crohn's disease. So is your approach to address each specific disorder and make it legalized or, broader, for that? Or, is the approach going to be in the future to just make it legalized for all conditions that it can work for?
Sure, and that's a great question. So here's what I learned quickly as we were putting this bill together, and with some advice of some others more familiar with this, and understand the political side. When people want to kill a bill, they only have to poke one hole in it. And so the broader the bill is, the more potential for holes. So if I were to list 4 diseases and say we're going to expand the use of cannabis oil for these 4, I have to defend all 4. And like I said, I'm not a medical doctor. I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I'm really in trouble. So by narrowing it down to 1 that I think makes real good sense, we can continue that progression. Because the fear was that if we try to go broad and I put 2, 3, or 4 in there, and then the questions start coming out in committee about this one, and I can't defend one of them, then all of a sudden everything starts to falter. So maybe there comes a time where we could say, this cannabis oil doesn't have the implications of an opioid. So when you can give cannabis oil instead of an opioid, we probably should, and broaden it quickly. But I think that's got to come after we show its true use, potential, and success, kind of with baby steps. Yes, sir. Okay.
Just so I can get on the record.
How you doing, sir? My name's Daniel. I'm also from Virginia Beach. I'm a law student at Regent University down there. You mentioned you were in business. As we transition to a legal industry for the production of the CBD oil here in Virginia, do you have any ideas for, I know we're talking about criminal justice and medical, any idea for the reform to allow the structuring of these businesses and the legal taxation here in Virginia without getting caught up with drug tax laws and such like that?
Sure. From the taxation side, it's relatively simple. From the legality side and how it's manufactured and then distributed through channels that separate it from other channels that could be deemed illegal, I have to leave that up to the legal experts. I know we have a lot of smart people, not only in courts of justice, but also up in Richmond and staff that can put those pieces together. But I leave those up for the lawyers. So, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I'll come over there.
Sorry, I can't see you back there. Sorry.
Yeah, it's recording. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
I'm Casey from Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Wonderful. JMU.
Go Dukes! I don't get to say that in large rooms very often and be justified, but go Dukes. So in your opinion, how closely related, tied in relationship are the issues with industrial hemp and agriculture, along with possibly healthcare reform? These are big and little ideas. So locally, agriculture and support of that with industrial hemp,
Right.
along with the CBD oil together. Where does that all fit in, do you think, in these baby steps that you're talking about?
Well, when you talk about industrial hemp, are you talking about the growing of hemp for purposes of construction and that sort of thing? Okay.
Yeah, and how that relates just to green economy,
Sure.
and pairing that with our CBD.
Well, that's where kind of the line gets drawn, I think. So we've moved forward. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine, my seatmate, Joseph Yost, out of Giles County, had a bill in that would allow hemp to be grown in Virginia. And ironically, excuse me, that was interesting because that was brought forward before, and there was a lot of debate and heated conversation around allowing that, which is interesting because you can build houses out of hemp. And industrial hemp, if someone would joke about, if you smoke a house and the only thing you're going to get is a headache. It's completely different. And once again, it's about the education piece. Industrial hemp has a lot of agricultural opportunities to it. And I think when you start looking at, what's going on with tobacco and the decrease in that, can we offset that impact with industrial hemp? Now, I'm not a farmer. I can't speak to the soil of one versus the soil of the other, and it doesn't make sense. But I can tell you that the more we're allowed to grow in Virginia, the more in general, the more in plants or products we're allowed to grow of all different types of opportunities, the better our agricultural economy is going to be. So I know we've had moved forward with industrial hemp. There's someone in Virginia Beach that built a rather nice house using hemp for a number of reasons, whether it's insulation and others. Unfortunately, he had to have his imported in from Canada. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. When you come over to the oil side and the medical side of the spectrum, it's a completely different thing. We can argue whether it should or shouldn't be different, but perception makes it different. And so right now, that whole issue is solely on the medical side. That's all people look at. They don't look at what it can do on the agricultural side. And I don't think for a very long time we'll ever see it crossed over or thought of as increasing agricultural opportunities or other things. It's solely in that one little box right now. And but it'd be interesting to see where it goes. Well, trust me, I'm not probably that much ahead of you, so.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
hi.
Hi.
I'm Lennis Worth. I've lived all over Virginia. I joined NORML in 1972, so I'm going to give you a question that's probably a long view
Sure.
question. One of the main groups of people who are interested in medical marijuana are veterans returning from combat.
Mm-hmm.
They have post-traumatic stress syndrome and pain. Excuse me, but also many of them are prescribed drugs which increase the likelihood that they would be they would be a suicide risk. And this is one of the problems with post-traumatic stress to start with. So my question is, what are the special challenges that you see once we get beyond the things like Crohn's disease and, and epilepsy, where we're dealing with something that's a bit more like mental health, but we're talking about cannabis?
Sure.
So what do you see as being the special challenges there? And I'm asking for veterans.
Sure, no, thank you, and it's a great question. It's the same challenges, honestly, that we're seeing on Crohn's. You see, the questions that are being asked right now as we look to whether we should allow those suffering with Crohn's disease to use cannabis oil is, are there alternatives on the market? Because if there's other alternatives on the market that can provide the same results, then the way people look at it, there's no need to legalize cannabis oil. And so that's what we're trying to show as we go forward this week. And that's going to be the thought on everything. So whether it's those with PST or and stuff, they're looking at the same scenarios. Is there other things? But that shouldn't be what we're asking. We should be asking, what is the best medical treatment? What is the treatment that has the best success of best chance of success, the least chance of unintended consequences and bad impacts, and then that should be what's able to be prescribed. It sometimes blows me away that we're having this discussion about cannabis oil, and I'm looking at that, but I'm looking through what you prescribe now for Crohn's disease or other things, and I've got opioids, and y'all know about the opioid discussion we have up here. I mean, I got opioids that get prescribed that people get addicted to. We crack down on the prescriptions of opioids, false prescriptions, and that's leading to heroin use in many parts of the state. And so why wouldn't we find an alternative when I can look at like cannabis oil, it keeps them off opioids, and I don't have that progression to something as terrible as heroin. So I think we need to change the discussion. We need to change the topics that we're looking at. It shouldn't be, is there something else? And if there is, we don't need cannabis oil. It's, is this better than what's being done today? And if we can change the conversation, that's when we can start writing broader bills that say, this is a controlled substance, it can only be prescribed for certain things, but when we talk about what it can be prescribed for, it's if it has opportunity to have a significant positive impact and it's better than what's sitting there on the market today. Yes, ma'am. Well, a lot of the research is there now. No, with some diseases we do need more. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I was looking at some of the Crohn's research, and I could use a little bit more Crohn's, that research. I think the last one I found was maybe a 2014. I think it was very conclusive, but it'd be nice to have some other stuff. So getting the research out there is going to need to be done more on some of these other diseases. But then that research is going to have to get into the hands of policymakers, and the right conversation is going to have to take place. Once again, it's because it's not just research of does it work. Now it's the research of what scared the heck out of me 2 nights ago, where I knew I was going to go talk about all the medicines that people on Crohn's disease were going to take, and once again, not being a doctor, I can barely spell aspirin, never mind this other stuff. And so I started pulling down all the drugs that someone on Crohn's would take, and I'm reading these things, and this one causes this, and this one causes this, and this one you can't use with this, and if this person has this, they can't take this, and my head's starting to spin. And so I'm doing these cross matrices, trying to figure out, well, who can actually take one of all these drugs? And then when I had a conversation yesterday, I said, is it that cannabis oil truly can replace this list of all these different types of drugs? And in some cases, the answer is yes. Well, that becomes a no-brainer. So once we can have that type of discussion, I think we're going down the right track. So it's having the studies that show cannabis oil has significant positive impacts over those opportunities today, and then the education on what truly the potential and negative impacts are of some of these drugs that are being pushed out with some of these diseases and some of those harmful impacts that have occurred.
Seems weird. I have to bring a mic to you.
First off, I just want to thank you for coming. Obviously, this last year, we've seen even more states giving more and more access to marijuana. I just wanted to ask you, are you in favor of marijuana decriminalization in Virginia? And what are your thoughts on legal adult access here in Virginia?
Sure. So I haven't gotten, for me, it's a baby step thing, right? I've paid attention to a lot of stuff that's going on in Colorado, and some of the issues they've had from, honestly, surely a legal aspect. I mean, right now in Colorado, you've got $1 billion sitting in storage units because they can't put it into a bank. It's legal by the state, illegal by the Fed, so you can't put the money in the bank account, and it's causing massive problems. They learned a lot of things. One, the packaging. If it's a rice, it looks like a Rice Krispie treat, and it's put in the pantry, and the kitty's sitting down, you've got a problem. And then they said, okay, you have to have the packaging done a certain way, but that doesn't work if you eat half of it, and it goes into a bag afterwards. So now you have to stamp the food, and they've learned a lot of things. So a lot of that has to go in there. I haven't gotten down the route of saying we need to go and legalize everything. That hasn't been something, honestly, I've even looked at. For me, I always make my decisions of whether something's worth fighting for, is it how it impacts the people that are asking. And recreational use of anything is, maybe some people say, well, we should, it's not worse than this, and because we have this, we should be able to have this. And that's, something that a lot of doctors can figure out, and there's some discussion to be had there. The reason why I jumped in this is there are people's lives at risk. I'm not a doctor, but it's not a recreational use that people came to me with. It's I'm hurting, my mom's hurting, people are dying, or they're being pushed on the opioids. And all of a sudden, it becomes a point in time thing of every day we wait to provide another solution, more and more people are being hurt. So I don't want to opine on, can we go further to legalize it? I personally haven't gone down that route and said we need to do this. But what I have recognized is there's a true issue at hand, a true problem at hand for those with certain diseases. The studies, I believe, show that cannabis oil in medical use will make a difference, and that's why I'm willing to fight for that. And as others continue on working on the other stuff, I'm happy to look at that as well.
I believe we do have a bill going through this year for decriminalization. Are you in favor of that?
That's that bill. Is that the one with Tommy Norman?
That's the crimes.
Okay, the study bill. So I'm on a couple of committees. So we have 2,000 bills that come through, and for me, it's always devil in the details, right? So I want to be able to see the bills. I can tell you that I do like Tommy's bill. I think that's an important bill. And I'm willing to look at the decriminalization piece, but I want to go through the bill itself and talk to the lawyers. If it comes out, I'm willing to look at it, but if it comes out of committee, I'll need to go do some of the legal stuff on it. But right now, I know that it's that baby step stuff, and if I can get the medical use, I'm happy, and then I'm happy to look at the other stuff as well. I will tell you, 30,000-foot view, we can't crowd our jails because someone gets arrested, with a little bit of possession. And I mean, you talk to any sheriff and what's going on right now, what's crowding our jails. We've got to come up with a different answer. So we have to find an alternative to what's being done today. And so that, I think, gets to the answer. But like I said, I'd like to see the details on some of that. And I think we can probably get somewhere around that angle. But like I said, you got to look at some of these details in there. But it can't be something that clogs our jails, and because that's causing a lot of the other fiscal impacts on our budgets and overcrowding implications. No problem. Thank you. Yes, sir. Sorry, ma'am. Oh, sorry.
This is a kind of a follow-up question on legalization. Ryan mentioned other states. There are actually 8 states now: Colorado, Alaska, Maine, Massachusetts, Nevada, Oregon, California. And now there are also legislators in the Northeast that are looking at legalizing I don't like to call it recreational use. I'm sure Russ and I will agree if we call it personal use. Right. But what do you think both the economic impact and the law enforcement impact will be in Virginia with those numbers of states having legal regulated markets?
It's something that, to get the true economic impact that some project, the Fed's going to have to step in. They are. You can't have something legalized by groups of states and still illegal by the Commonwealth, by federal government. I mean, that's the banking problem we're having, right? So I think when people talk about the true economic impacts, I think that requires also a legalization at the fed level, so some of them can be recognized. Obviously, I think that there could be impacts that, from a law enforcement perspective, I've seen a lot of these studies on there. The realities of them, I think, are still being proven out. It hasn't been that long since some of these states have actually legalized, and I'll tell you, I mean, some of the unintended consequences are I mean, out of the gate were pretty interesting. I mean, literally, you know, the packaging. I mean, when they legalized in Colorado, no one talked about packaging, and we got the problem we've got. When it came to, no one thought for a second that the biggest growth in marijuana use wasn't going to be smoking or now even edibles. It's beverages. So, and that, a whole new scenario when they went down and said, well, we're going to want you to stamp the food, but you can't stamp a liquid. I think that a lot of people are going to have to focus on it. And there's gonna, I mean, like with anything, there's product out there, there's taxes not being paid on it. I'm not saying that justifies legalizing it, but I am saying that there are impacts of doing so. I just don't, it's not something I've been concentrated on.
Yes, I started an organization called the SOS PAC, which back 20 years ago was saving our society with police and citizens together for community policing and helping the homeless. But then about 5 years ago, I'm wearing this badge here with LEAP, which is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and they were speaking at a NORML event at Thomas Jefferson Hospital in Northern Virginia. What really caught my eye was a shirt that he was wearing that said, "Cops want to legalize pot. Ask me why." And since I'm with the Fraternal Order of Police over here, I had to go ask him, because that isn't something I would talk to them about when I was with Nova 35 or Lodge 1 in D.C. And so I went and asked him, and he said, well, for the benefit of our kids as well as ourselves, so we don't get criminalized for doing something that's less troublesome than drinking. And so I totally agree with that. But then I was telling the cops when I was driving one time, one of them police vans, about 12 or 15, before I got to the punchline, the officer up front had as much mouth as me, and he said, I'll tell you why we want to legalize it. They want to smoke it, he said. So with that organization LEAP, you've heard of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition? It's a real good, strong organization nationally and internationally. And then there's another group that started in Seattle, Washington, and then in Delaware, they're trying to make it go nationwide, called LEAD, and it's called Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. Instead of treating people as criminals, you know, represent us, go back to, you know, with them going back to protect and serve. It's where they help people, give them programs, and I like that. Have you ever heard of that yet, LEAD?
I've not heard of LEAD.
Okay, well, we're working on expanding that, and I'll see about getting you some information on it. But I thank you, and yeah, because it's something we're tired of being criminalized. They put hardships on families. I'm having to play poppy to my grandchild, and it just wrecks kids' lives and everybody's, really. Right. So to decrim, we need it. Thank you, and thank you for helping us with the medical.
Well, thank you, and you know, that speaks to it. Really is the big issue is education. One thing that your organization has done a tremendous job of, and it's been. It's education with facts and figures. We have rallies out in Richmond at the General Assembly building every day. Every day groups come down. And there are two types of groups. There are groups that come down and they'll come see us and they'll drop off facts and figures, and we'll have discussions about facts and figures and stuff like that. And then there are those that are out there chanting things that some I'm not going to repeat. And you know, and it's that, and that gets us nowhere. When you can't bring both sides to the table, so we can share, here are our concerns, here are the studies we're looking at, and the other side can share their concerns and studies they're looking at. And you may still have to agree to disagree, but at least you know where the divide is. And that's what I think needs to continue, and that's why I think y'all are doing this the right way, is it's not rhetoric, it's not sound bites, it's not yelling and screaming, it's having studies, pushing studies, showing logical, rational, support of some of the arguments you're making. And that's how it kind of gets the attention of us up here. And then understanding where some of the concerns are from your fellow neighbors, around the Commonwealth, and us up here that we feel that we can't go down certain roads. And by us talking, maybe there is a middle ground to be had, but at a minimum, at least we know where each other stands and why we have certain concerns. And I think that's where this has been heading. I think as long as that continues to go down that path of that civility, I think where there's common ground, we'll continue to see some movement, like I think we are today with the medical use of it. Yes, sir.
Well, Delegate, hello. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Justin, and I'm the federal lobbyist for NORML National. Okay. And at the national level in April, we're hoping to reauthorize what's known as the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which protects states that have implemented medicinal marijuana programs from the DOJ enforcing federal law in those states. It's been bipartisan approved for a number of years now, and we're expecting that to pass again. And we're also expecting to see positive movement on what's known as the Polis-McClintock Amendment, which would protect states that have legalized it, as well as we're expecting, cautiously optimistic in the next 2 to 4 years, also on banking policy, so that way legal industries will be able to have access to banking services, which you addressed. Can you talk about how the shift in the conversation would be in your caucus here at the state level if you started to see more signs of hope from federal action, whether or not it's full descheduling, but at least to empower you as a state legislator to be able to determine the course and policies for your state?
Well, in some cases, Washington taking action, sometimes it's preemptive, so at that point we don't get a say in certain things. In other cases, Washington saying something almost pushes us down and to look at certain things and prioritize it. But I'll tell you what I think the most important thing that comes out of Washington doing something is usually when they do something, there's a lot of information there. There is a lot of states. There's a lot of testimony. If Washington does something and it's still open to the states as far as whether it's optional, then it becomes, well, do we do it as well? And for that, we have to have the facts. We have to have the testimonies. We have to have all that information. And when Washington makes a decision, usually there's a lot of that there, which gives us that resource to look at. Right now, like I said, it's for me, just looking at what I'm doing today with Crohn's disease, the amount of information I'm trying to digest is over my head. To look at some of the things Washington's dealing with is just tremendous. And if I had to make some of those decisions now, I have to find that information myself. It'd be next to impossible. But if we're faced with certain decisions, knowing that Washington's reviewed them and took an action, then there's usually a repository that we can go and we can pull this information on and we can make our decision at the state level. And I think that becomes the biggest and most helpful as we look at our opportunities.
Hey, thank you again for being here today. I have a comment and a quick question following up about the amount of people in jail, so forth. My friend Cindy Cutler with Decriminalize Norfolk interviewed our sheriff, Norfolk sheriff, in the past 6 months, Cindy, and he gave her facts and figures. 13% of everybody in Norfolk jail is there for simple possession of marijuana, and it constituted $1.8 million a year of their budget. So that's something for all of us to think about as federal money trickling to us is slowing.
Yeah.
So my question for you is about the bill that's up right now. Adam Eben, Bill Stanley, and Les Adams, who are both Republicans, about the fact that you can get caught for simple possession, has nothing to do with your car, and guaranteed you lose your license for 6 months, so now you can't get to your job. A lot of people have to drive anyway, and then they get caught, and then the whole DMV and the fines, and people lose their jobs and their family. And do you support this?
Yeah, I do. We have to be careful of unintended consequences. When people break the law, there should be some type of punishment that goes with it. Now, whether should be criminal or not criminal or whatever the case, that's, there's a discussion maybe they had there. But what you can't do is punish them in a manner that really doesn't, get to the motivation of maybe why they did what they did, but then have the unintended consequences of them not being able to keep their job, get to their job, maintain employment, which at that point take care of their family, and that leads into a whole host of other issues. So that's the biggest problem I have is when you look at punishing someone and not paying attention to the unintended consequences of what happens as that trickle-down effect occurs. When it's really, really simple. I mean, it's common sense. You take away their car, in many cases, there isn't, bus service all over the Commonwealth. Then they can't get to work, they don't get paid, they can't pay their mortgage, they don't have a home, they're on the street, and you go on from that. And then on the backside, well, what did that, punishment do? Well, it arguably heightened what the Commonwealth is going to be paying now for their social services, because now we created a family that, is no longer, has a roof over their head. So we have to be careful what the punishments do. And in case I think they've got a good bill there, if it makes it over to our side, I'd be more than happy to. Yes, sir. Thank you.
We talk about unintended consequences, and we have a serious opioid epidemic in this country. And my question is, and I'd like to know if there's been any studies done on this, in those states where it is legal, whether medical or recreational, how are the opioid statistics in those states versus, say, Virginia, that has a serious opioid epidemic? And the thing, and also I look at is that we expend so much police resources on enforcing the marijuana laws, where they should be focusing their attention on the bigger problems, whether it's drug trafficking or heroin or prostitution, whatever else. But it just seems to me that we're expending a lot of resources on something that doesn't have to be done.
Right. Well, to the first question, when you look at opioid use. Now, I haven't found the studies that show, certain states compared to other states, and it's not that I want to compare two states at a point in time. I'd want to compare the states' use opioid problems they had, and then what happened after medical use was approved. So I can get that before and after, as opposed to the comparison. But I haven't found those studies. But for me, it's almost common sense, right? You can't use medical marijuana for every instance that you would prescribe an opioid. But there are instances that you can. And to that extent, if I prescribe medical marijuana, I don't have to worry about that transition of potentially that becoming an addiction and potentially becoming heroin use. And so I think that in of itself almost makes it worth go looking at these other opportunities. Those studies would be great to have. I have not. If anyone does find them, please let me know, because I think that gets to the heart of what we're talking about of the best use of treatments.
Sorry, that's all the time we've got for questions for this delegate, but please let's give him our appreciation for being here.
Thank you.
And I'll get you those studies. I actually have them. The states that have access to medical marijuana have a 20% reduction in their opioid deaths and 1,500 fewer pills prescribed.
I need those.
Yeah, so I'll get those to you.
Okay, real quick. So let me show you the other side of what it is to be an advocate. You have to be able to hustle because, like I said before, we are a nonprofit organization and we depend on your donations. So who here would like to buy this book so that I can give it to Glenn today to educate him on the endocannabinoid? Okay, well, see Jim Michelle. This is yours.
Thank you.
It's very, very informative, and you can use it tomorrow. Okay? Yeah. Okay, second thing is, this is a nonpartisan effort, and the way that you can help us today, especially within the Republican Party of Virginia, to advance this issue, I will secure a signature, a ballot for you, a petition for you to sign. Glenn is running for the Republican position of Lieutenant Governor, so we need to get him on the ballot. What this would mean is that he would be the Republican candidate running for Lieutenant Governor, and in that way, he can push this issue. We know he's in favor of medical, so you definitely want him to be at the top of the list, as opposed to maybe some of the other candidates who we know that are not supportive. So once I get those lists, we would really appreciate your signatures. Like I said, it just puts him on the ballot as the Republican. So,
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, can I get a picture of the picture?
Thank you. Great meeting you.
I'll be in touch through email. All right, we get such a wonderful bonus here by getting another delegate to speak to us, and I hope I've got, is it Steve? Steve Heretick, state delegate from Portsmouth. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Let me put some stuff down here real quick. And once again, my name is Steve Heretick. I represent the 79th House District, which is portions of Norfolk and Portsmouth. Now, I will tell you, there we go. I will tell you that I come to this a little differently, and I find myself kind of sort of amazed at being standing here, because 2 minutes about my background and we'll launch. I'm a former federal prosecutor. I spent time in the Justice Department in the criminal division. I clerked for a federal judge. But when I went to law school, I also went to, as a dual JD PhD program, so I went to medical school, frankly, at the same time. And in that experience, I was working a PhD in forensic clinical psychology at the same time I was doing my law degree. And I had the opportunity to work with a population essentially dealing with addictive disorders in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. And I can tell you that I extended, this clinical rotation for a lot of time. I did like 4 different rotations at this clinic because I thought it taught me a lot of things that really, as a small boy, boy from a small southern town, that I had really misunderstood fundamentally about what addictions are, and then what kind of feeds that process. Growing up, I knew, a lot of people who smoked pot. It was not a big deal at the time, except, of course, if your parents catch you, or if the police catch you. And that's kind of what ruins lives. I mean, I remember, friends of mine, kind of got caught by their parents, and it was a huge deal for them. They got shipped off to a hospital. They were, 10 minutes away from sticking needles in their veins, and it kind of just took my friend's life sideways. And coming from that experience, and working with folks in North Philadelphia, and working in the court system, both as a federal law clerk and then as a Justice Department lawyer, I began to see this very differently, because I can tell you that, when you talk to judges kind of behind the curtains, when you talk to other lawyers behind the curtains, when you talk to prosecutors and defense lawyers, you find yourself having these conversations like, why are we doing this? What really are we trying to protect people from in this conversation? And that's kind of, started a rearrangement of my thinking about this issue. Now, for anybody here who's been through law school, probably most of you, check your Facebook for the next 2 minutes, because I want to talk about a little basic law. Because when we talk about criminal law, we go back to basically 2 basic concepts that give rise to what is criminal law in America. And the legal Latin still works. There are offenses called malum in se, and offenses we regard as malum prohibitum. And this is criminal law 101, so I'm sorry if I'm boring some of you folks. Malum in se are those types of criminal offenses which are transculturally, transtemporally, transgeographically always considered to be wrong. Okay? Murder, robbery, rape, the biggies. Everybody for all time agrees. These things are pretty much bad, and they're pretty much wrong. But then you get to other series of offenses called malum prohibitum. The thing is, the Latin translates roughly, the thing is bad because it's simply prohibited. And that really takes up most of the types of regulatory law that we see. Now, what is that? We can talk a little bit about speeding. Why is the speed limit 55 and not 45? Why is it 55 and not 70? Somebody at some point said, 55 is probably a good break-even point, so that's the limit we're going to set. What about drinking age, for example? When I was coming up, a little bit older, got some gray hair going on here, drinking age, at least in Virginia, was 18, so I got a little lucky then. Drinking age now was 21. Who sets these limits, and why is it bad? Because somebody that looks and sounds a lot like me decided that it was. Okay? That's the rule. And I think if you look at the history of marijuana in America, that's kind of how we got here. Marijuana historically was banned at about the same time and pretty much the same way as we ended up with the Volstead Act, prohibition. I think there are a lot of parallels that we could argue about that, but I think that it's there. Why is it illegal? We know this. And by the way, what I'm using here, just so you'll know, are talking points that I used about 2 months ago to talk to a very well-attended session of the Virginia Municipal League. Imagine that. Every city, major city in Virginia, is a member of VML. They had a special seminar on this. That should tell you something. Why is it illegal? We know this. Perceived as addictive, gateway drug, all that stuff. Arguments for decriminalization, I think I'm preaching to the choir when I point out that, look down the list. Prohibition is costly, it's less harmful than other regulated drugs. We regulate, but, we don't ban alcohol and tobacco. Maybe we should just save our law enforcement dollar for more, serious offenses. Now, let's talk about social cost, and this blows my mind. Marijuana accounts for nearly half of every dollar that is spent on law enforcement in the United States. Half. Think about that. You got that right. This is an old number, but I think it tells you something. The federal law enforcement drug budget went from $4.5 billion in '91 to almost double that in 2002. Again, the majority of the budget goes to enforcement of marijuana laws. The Bureau of Justice Statistics is pretty straightforward about that. Arrest for marijuana, New York alone, $100 million a year. Okay? I can tell you that according to the Huffington Post at least, and the Sheriff of Norfolk, in his jail alone, Norfolk by itself, $1.6 million a year. Multiply that all over the Commonwealth, and I think you begin to see that we're spending a lot of money for, for what? Let's talk about what happens if we continue to criminalize this. I think, again, I'm preaching to the choir with a lot of this. We lose employment opportunities. We have young people who get a minor arrest, sometimes in high school, shortly after, maybe in college. What happens to them? You can't get a job. You can't get a security clearance. You can't go to work for public safety. You can't go to work for law enforcement. A lot of jobs now ask you up front, do you have any kind of drug conviction? You're being truthful about it? Yeah, you check the box. And there you go. That costs you your job. In addition to that, and just think about the loss in a lifetime between a job that pays you, say, $25,000 to start and a job that pays you $50,000 to start. Do that math, multiply it over a 40-year work-life trajectory, and what do you got? You have a lot of lost opportunity. You have a lot of lost potential. And if you just do the simple math, time value of money, we're talking millions of dollars in potential individual revenue. Think about what that does to people's lives. Think about what could have been and what was, purely because somebody got busted with a joint at a concert. Okay? Not so long ago, I remember I'm an attorney, I practice law in Portsmouth. And there was a Fish concert in Hampton, some of you may have heard of. They had over 500 pot arrests. Okay? The courts were clogged for months. There were special dockets. The next year, Fish came to Portsmouth. There was one. One. And that was some very zealous young woman who was busy trying to sell the same bag to the same officer 3 or 4 times. And she just would not be persuaded that he was really a cop, although he was, by the way, in uniform. And, what do you do at a certain point? It's like, okay, it's like, I think it's one of those things where I think the poor woman got laughed out of the courtroom more than anything else. But think about the collateral consequences. If you're not employable, you're living probably at home with mom and dad in the basement. How many folks do we know that do that? What are those potentials and the cost of everybody's lifetime? Now, one thing we have seen, and one thing I think we have to take some comfort from, is the fact that societal norms which generally govern, going back to my whole statement ago about malum prohibitum, all you Latin freaks in the room, those things that we decide are wrong, not necessarily because everybody agrees with that, but because certain people like me think that they are. Societal norms have been changing. Interestingly enough, it was in President Nixon's administration, who knew, that the Schaefer Commission first recommended considering decriminalization. Since that time, as everybody knows, I love this factoid. Even Dan Quayle, you say potato, I say potato, favored legislation which decriminalized, okay? Today, we've got the American Bar Association, guys that look like me, the National Council of Churches, the NEA, the American Public Health Association. This is in the 1970s. Where are we today? I think this is a somewhat older number. 24 states have legalized or at least decriminalized. Interesting study. I did a poll last year in my district, and remember, I represent pieces of Norfolk, pieces of Portsmouth, primarily, working middle class kind of district. I have the ports of Virginia. I have the Norfolk Navy base, Navy Hospital, ODU. 68% of the respondents to that poll favored at least decriminalization. That, to me, was amazing, okay? So this isn't, our generation saying this is probably not as bad as our parents think. This is a lot of generations thinking that this is okay. But where are we with it in Virginia? Well, Virginia, as you probably know, lives and dies by the good old-fashioned Dillon rule. 140 of us, a couple blocks down the street, make these laws, okay? Nothing can change in localities unless and until we collectively decide that they can do that. Dillon rule, for those of you who never heard of it, is simply a legal equivalent of Mother May I. Localities, cities, counties, towns have no authority to do anything unless and until that authority is specifically granted to them by the General Assembly, okay? I can tell you as a former city council member, we were always a little, pissed is not the right word, we were always a little upset about that. But now on the other side of the equation, I kind of see it differently. Of course I would. But the fact of the matter is that is the framework we have in Virginia. But I think that one thing that we can all agree, no matter which side of the debate you're on, is that is objective, balanced debate. Nothing more, nothing less is going to drive the future of this issue. Now, where are we today? And I call it reading the tea leaves because that's the best I got. I will tell you that I think it goes without saying, and I saw my friend Glenn Davis here just a minute ago, which I thought was kind of amazing, that this issue really is getting a lot more bipartisan attention. You're beginning to see, folks, it's not a Republican versus Democrat issue as much anymore. Surprisingly, if you look who's putting in bills, Jill Vogel, Bill Stanley, Les Adams, those aren't my team, okay? Those are very conservative Republicans. And you're seeing them putting in bills, not to strip it all away and legalize it tomorrow, but to take incremental steps in allowing marijuana to be used and frankly prescribed in limited situations, almost as test cases. And I would argue that that's exactly what we're talking about. Look at the vote numbers. I mean, in my profession, you live and die by your vote count. Senate Bill 1298, Vogel's bill, passes the Senate 29-11. Okay? How many Republicans does that take? That's interesting to me. UC Levine, medical marijuana certification. It's coming up tomorrow, by the way, as is my bill. If any of you are free tomorrow afternoon, come sit in House courts and watch what happens. Yep. It's going to be probably a very quick day, but let's. I think you probably heard about these other bills, but I point out just the vote counts. Abbott and Stanley, two very unlikely co-patrons. 38-2. That should tell you, if nothing else does, that on both sides of the aisle and in every sort of generational representation in the Assembly, people are starting to look at this differently. That's, I think, some comfort. There is I say little, there's really no new emphasis on enhancing penalties. Nobody today is trying to make this worse. But remember, the old adage, nobody ever gets elected to political office by being soft on crime, okay? Because I'll tell you, the quick and easy way to lose is to have, some guy says, well, Heretick, he's soft on crime. He wants to liberalize all this stuff. He wants to make it possible that you've got these drug addicts running wild and killing people. And he's just terrible. So, think about the TV ads you've seen. The weird part about it is, and I will be very candid with you, I'm not going to stand here and try to pretend to you or anybody else that marijuana is a wonderful thing, okay? But I can tell you this. I am a guy who, unfortunately, likes his whiskey and likes his red wine, okay? And I can tell you that, pound for pound, what I do to myself is probably a little worse. I know that. But that is my choice. And I think... I am, mindful that, in other states of the country, there are efforts to make, red meat illegal. City of New York, you can't sell large sodas. I mean, I get what that is. But by the same token, you know, I'm kind of a grown-up. I don't always make great decisions. My wife would tell you I don't make any. But the point of it is, isn't it my choice what I put in my body? You know? I thought it was amazing. And everybody here, I was at the dinner in Norfolk about 6-8 weeks ago. City of Norfolk has its annual legislative dinner. We're all sitting there, nice meal. We have some presentations about Norfolk's legislative agenda. Senator Tommy Normant, the Republican majority leader in the Senate, shows up and he's offering his perspective about legislation for this year. He goes through, you know, his stuff and then he starts his agenda. He said, wait a minute. Let me just sort of add one more. He said, you know, I catch a lot of spears in my life. What's one more couldn't hurt? I think Virginia needs to decriminalize marijuana. Okay? You could have probably heard the deafening sound of jaws hitting the table from here. Okay? That is the last thing anybody expected to hear. And his rationale, I think, was a lot like mine. He is an attorney. He spends his life in the courts. He sees the good, the bad, and the ugly every day. And he pointed out, because he primarily practiced in Williamsburg, home of my alma mater, William and Mary, and I was horrified to find out that there is occasionally pot busts in Williamsburg. Who knew? You're right. And he was like, you know, why are, you know, all these kids having their futures ruined by this? Smart kids. How I got in is still a matter of debate. But smart kids primarily, you know, cream of the crop for high school admissions, you know, toughest school in Virginia to get into, except for me, which I'm still trying to figure out how that happened. And they're looking to lose careers, going back to what I said before, for this. And the Republican majority leader in the Senate, much more important, much more influential than I will ever be in my wildest dreams, says we need to decriminalize it. The weird part about it is I really think that half the room was looking at him with their jaws on the table, and the other half were looking at me because I had the only decrim bill in the House last year. It went down not quite as quickly as the legalization bills. I think it took a little 3 or 4 seconds for them to realize this wasn't the same thing, but nevertheless, you know, that should tell you that things are beginning to shift. And if you felt the earth kind of tremor just a little bit in the beginning of December and didn't know where that was coming from, it was not an earthquake, it was Tommy Normant. You know, I do think that, you know, medical use, I know you've been talking quite a bit about that. You know, medical uses are becoming much more acceptable and indeed, frankly, prevalent. And I think that that's, frankly, the next major step that we're going to see. And that is the enhanced and increasing, you know, medical adaptive use of marijuana. I have a one-word answer for you. Politics. Okay? It ain't medicine. Did I mention, I was on the Virginia Board of Medicine for over 10 years. I was president of the Board of Medicine, okay? The doctors, you know, a lot of people I work with, I still do national healthcare policy sort of on the side because I get bored easily. I had lunch not quite 2 years ago with the president's drug policy control czar, Mike Botticelli. And a former addict. And he will tell you privately that he looks at this very differently. He looks at this as a public health issue, not a criminal law issue. And I do think that if he were sitting here today, I'm not going to paraphrase him because I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I know what he told us, very frankly, about his view of this. Where are we with this stuff? And by the way, I do think, you know, one of the reasons I do think we see a lot more Republicans starting to look at this is the fact that, you know, going back to what I said a minute ago about being my choice, I do think that this is an issue that the libertarians, sometimes the more of the far right, are really taking to heart. You know, they want government off your back, out of your bedroom, you know, kind of doing what it's supposed to do, no more, no less. And I think there are a lot of libertarians who think, oh, why is this a problem? You know, my mom and my dad were kind of terrible about it, you know, but it's not that big a deal, you know, if that's your choice and you make it knowingly. I think one of the problems we've got is we don't have a lot of objective research that we can discuss. There are an interesting number of law review articles about it for anybody who really gets bored at night and wants to go to sleep. But you can read the evolution of these articles that go back 30, 40 years where they start that this is terrible, these people should be locked up if not crucified, to the articles today saying, kind of, why are we doing this? Same thing with medical journals. Not so long ago, you're not going to get federal, grants for research if you're busy trying to overturn federal drug control law. So what do you think the studies say? I think now that you're getting a little bit more opportunity to really look at these things in a more balanced way, the studies are evolving, but for every study, you can cite for, somebody can cite against. I don't think that in that mix, that is a really productive use right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Mm-hmm. Sure. And I think that's my point. Sometimes you say what you get paid to say. Mm-hmm. Right. But go ahead. Mm-hmm. I certainly think, yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. Those studies are coming. But remember that on balance, if you want to compare study for study, the great weight of the evidence, some of which are decades old, are still against. Okay, so again, we can point to these new studies and say, hey, see? And they can point to studies and think, no. So, but you're right, they are identity studies, but we need to do more of them. And part of the problem with that, going back to your point earlier, is if this is a Schedule I drug, it's pretty damn hard to study them. Right. I think that, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's not.
Mm-hmm.
Then AIDS based. I don't see.
Well, neither do I. But the problem is some of my brethren do. Because if it's not in English and it's not, apple pie Chevrolet, et cetera, it just don't count, does it? I do think that, I think we need to be mindful that legalization, or I think probably the more realistic intermediate step, decriminalization, comes with its own set of problems, okay? And I think we have to be mindful of those going forward. Not that they're, an impediment today. But like I said, data studies give us problems. What are the real health effects? Chances are we won't really know for a while. We don't have any serious longitudinal studies out there that we can point to in the United States. No, I know. But I think, the question becomes, does marijuana arrest really serve as a Trojan horse for other types of selective law enforcement? You know, I can tell you the amount of times I've stood in court and heard, stopped a car, strong odor of marijuana. Never once in 30 years of practicing law as I've heard anybody say, weak odor of marijuana. So, I mean, obviously that gives entree to other things. You know, Fourth Amendment issues, search and seizure, it gives probable cause to a lot of other problems. I will say this, you know, and going back to my Board of Medicine experience, I think one of the more practical issues we're going to see if marijuana is permitted for, you know, medical types of medical use is where in Virginia you're going to find a doctor to write that prescription. Okay? Because as we all know, opiate addiction is a big, big issue today. I've taken a lot of licenses in the 10 years that I was on the board for doctors who were writing OxyContin with an open hand. Okay, and I think that there are a lot of doctors out there who are thinking, well, at least that's Schedule II. That's kind of legal. You know, if they're going to take my license for that, you know, somebody comes in with Crohn's disease or epilepsy, or other types of neurological disorders, or we need appetite stimulation for related to cancer treatment. Yeah, I'm with that, but I'm sure as hell not going to put my signature on a prescription. Okay, because we know what that leads to. It's an odd irony, and I'm still trying to find this article, but going back like 15 years, I remember reading in the Virginia Pilot, the Hampton Roads paper. This is when California was rolling out medical marijuana use. And they just decided to do sort of a nationwide survey of what states would otherwise permit marijuana to be used for medical purposes. Who knew? Virginia permitted it. Nobody ever knew it was on the books. Nobody ever prescribed it, needless to say. Not that you exactly go to the pharmacy and get it filled anyway. My HMO doesn't cover it. But that I don't know. I don't think so. Remember, I mean, even for the states where it's legal or not criminal, there's still that whole overlay of federal law that says, you know, it may be legal to you, but it's not legal to us. And, you know, the test cases for the conflict of law between state law and federal law and which really governs in a jurisdiction, as a lawyer, I'm not putting any bets on that. Okay? Yes, ma'am. It's really hard right now because, I mean, you know, you can't exactly go to, the Medical Society of Virginia, which is like the physician organization, and say, hey guys, how many here would prescribe marijuana? I think you have to go one by one by one, you know, but I can tell you that, you know, if a doctor were to call me as an attorney and say, hey, I've got this patient, what do I do? Legally, I have to say, look, you're putting your license on the line if you do this, okay? There's probably some really, outstanding doctors who would, but I can tell you, when you got to feed your kids and pay your mortgage, that's a different conversation. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's cheaper than Barbary. What can I tell you? Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. It may be an affirmative defense to the individual possessing it in like a criminal stop if there's a possession charge that follows, okay? But in order to assert the affirmative defense, the individual, the user would have to produce to the court a prescription and say, hey, I had this lawfully. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it is a workaround, but I will tell you that, in the reality world of medical regulation, I don't think it's going to be seen as that big a difference. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. But the point is, there has to be a lot more confidence in the medical professions, the licensed professions, that they're not going to get popped for doing this. Mm-hmm. Well, Glenn was around then, I wasn't. You know, it's I just yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not holding my breath for anything in Washington right now for lots of reasons. Of course, I am holding my breath for lots of other reasons because you just like, gee, what's next? So I wish I could think that this administration is going to be a little bit more proactive in this. Something just tells me that I don't think so. But who knows? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. I will tell you that we were advised Friday morning that House Rules has killed all studies for this year. Okay? It means that, at least as far as the House is concerned, there will be no studies. JLARC, nothing. Okay? Now, I don't know if this particular study, if it comes out of the Senate, is going to go to the Crime Commission. I don't know that. But I can tell you in one fell swoop with no argument and no debate, House Rules killed every last study that was requested by anybody in the House. So that's, I think, a pretty, I think that I think that the big reason is, budget shortfalls in the budget. You got people who, are underpaid. You have, 250 gaps in Virginia State Police. If I get my bill out tomorrow afternoon, then I will be buying red wine for everybody. Okay, it's best I can promise. But I will say last year, I reminded them because I think there were, and I'm guessing 4 or 5 legalization bills on the court's docket. I get up as the last one. They are all, before I open my mouth, they're ready to say, stop. This is not that. This is decriminalization. And I will tell you, for at least a couple of nanoseconds, there were a couple of guys on the Republican side of the dais who were like, wait a minute. And I could see them kind of talking about it, okay? So there are whisperings, like I said, this is reading tea leaves. I don't want to tell you it's science. But, I think that there is a growing recognition, at least among my colleagues, that the step is going to be to decriminalize, and it's going to come through essentially a medical use kind of conduit. Legalization, I think, is a very long way away in Virginia. I'm sorry to say that. But, you know, Virginia, as you might have noticed, is not cutting edge much of anything in law. You know, we will wait until about 47 other states in the country have done it, and then grudgingly, you know, we will do it and then complain about having done. I thought it was funny when the Queen came last time, then Governor Kane, you know, made a toast starting with a joke. He said, you know, how many Virginians does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer, of course, is 7. 1 to change the bulb and 6 to talk about how good the old one was. I think that is kind of a reflection of, you know, where, you know, my colleagues are in how to do this. You know, believe me, we are not avant-garde anything up on the Hill. And we will watch and wait. I thought I heard Glenn talk about, constant fears about unintended consequences, which drives any subject in the assembly. You know, when you want to do one thing, you know, you've got a bunch of people running, oh, what could happen, what can happen, what can't happen. And again, I think at certain points of legislation, you just have to cast your vote and hope it works out like you hope it will, you know? And I think this is going to be one of those subjects when the time comes. I don't expect a positive result tomorrow, but yeah, who knows? Sure, follow on. Mm-hmm. Okay. What law school? Oh, I'm sure that attitude is popular. Okay. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Well, the study that he was talking about, I mean, you know, to get a study done in Virginia, it has to be approved by the Assembly because these are expensive things, okay? Right, so there has to be money found for that. There has to be a budget line item. I mean, they're the nuts and bolts of getting things paid for. Now, I don't know what's going on with the Senate with that, to be very honest with you, but I know that, like I said, in the House, the other side, you know, they've simply killed every study we've asked for. Now, we haven't seen the stuff come over from the Senate side, but I can tell you, as a practical matter, if nobody in the House is getting their studies funded, then I don't think there's going to be much of a realistic appetite for Senate bills to come over and be studied. You know, I mean, that's just the practical reality of it, you know. If I can't get my stuff done, you can't get your stuff done either, and that's just the way this works. New ones, yes, I think it does. Yes, but only a very few of the studies that were killed were JLARC studies. So we have to assume that that means that no matter what it is, if you want $1 put behind anything study-wise, whether it's JLARC, Crime Commission, anything, it ain't happening. Now, I don't know that for sure. We just told that on Friday, but I know that all the health studies are gone, including some rather major economic kind of stuff that a few of us were really banking on to try to do, you know, try to make some structural changes in the way our budget is administered. So these are fairly big things. So. No. No, not at all. I mean, the bills are up tomorrow, so they're still out there. But the studies, in other words, the objective analysis that hopefully would go into, you know, giving support to these bills is kind of gone. So, to put it differently, the rug has kind of been pulled out from under this, at least for the moment. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to, I don't want to estimate this. I mean, because I do think that these types of studies are getting some traction, but it's your own crime commission, your own, JLARC. When your own people are telling you that, that's a little bit different than if somebody different from a different state is telling you that. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think you should. Because again, I think the more voices that are heard by folks that look and sound like me, you know, the easier it becomes to open your mind, open your eyes, open your ears to this types of studies you're talking about. But that's not, I mean, that's an evolving process. I don't think there's going to be one eureka moment where suddenly, you know, the entire, you know, all the courts of justice committees in the assembly are going to say, oh, wait a minute, you're right. That's not going to happen. It's going to be one mind at a time. Right. Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. And of course, we have these conversations. And even some of my colleagues on courts, which I am not, by the way, you know, they understand this stuff. They're lawyers just like me. They see the same things in the courtrooms. And privately, they will tell you that that they lean in favor of doing this. But go back to what I said earlier. No one gets elected by being soft on crime. Okay? That is almost a law of physics in politics. But they will tell you so is cocaine. Yeah. It is in House Courts. It is a half an hour. Hang on a minute. My LA just texted me this. I think it's a half hour. We're in the subcommittee. Yes. House Criminal Law Sub, House Room C. It's going to be a half hour after adjournment of the full subcommittee, or the full committee. So I wish I could tell you, because the House sits at noon. I mean, I don't think we're going to be finished with full session that early. So my guess, and it's purely that because I've been fooled a lot, is I'm guessing probably no earlier than 3 o'clock. You know, but you know, we're coming up on crossover, so bring your pajamas. That's all I can tell you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes. You know, to be very, that's a great question. I do think it gave me some encouragement. I mean, I was thinking about this for a long time. My son has Crohn's disease, so I hope I don't have to say much more about that. And to me, you know, having worked in, you know, the arena, like I said, you know, with addictive populations and that sort of thing, I've always seen this very differently. My mother, of course, would brain me with her umbrella, but I do think that, you know, I see it differently, but anybody in elective office is not going to put themselves out there for a good idea if it's an unpopular idea. So I think it was encouraging. And by the way, just to answer your question, my bill was in before the poll result was back. But I can tell you, just personally, it was a major sigh of relief when I saw that result. You know. Yeah. Well, I mean. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've seen other polls going back to that had a much higher positive response rate than ours. But the fact is, you know, you get to 60 on anything, much less nearly 70 on anything. I mean, we're America. We don't agree on anything. Okay. You get, you know, 7 out of 10 people that agree on this, you know, across all socioeconomic status, across all types of communities, across all types of educational types of backgrounds. That tells you something. Usually, you know, when we poll, you know, we will most of the time do it individually because, you know, there are a lot of district-specific questions that we like to add. So you tend to see these going out probably in, you know, the November, early December timeframe for individual offices. There may be larger types of polls that some of the, like Old Dominion University, Christopher Newport, William and Mary, some of the larger schools may be doing, but those come out pretty much all during the year. But yes. But remember, the best time to talk to us, to really sit down and talk about the types of studies we've heard about is not while the session is going on. I mean, to be in the General Assembly, I swear you've got to be ADHD. You've got maybe literally minutes to talk about any given bill. To vote on a bill, by the way, on the floor, we have 3 seconds, if that tells you anything. The other 10 months of the year, we are most of the time blessedly free. So if you really want to have a substantive conversation, where you can go multiple levels deep in terms of this or any other public policy, that's the time to catch us. Once it starts, we've got bills in committee, we've got committee hearings, we've got everything in the world going on. And it's really, really difficult to get, my attention. I'm not going to speak for my colleagues, but mine, for much more than 5 minutes at a time, because our days are just that tightly scheduled. So you want to, buttonhole people going into committee tomorrow. That'll be helpful, but it's probably not going to make any difference. It's when you can sit them down and focus them on it for a period of time and follow up with them, give them supporting information, give them the comfort that they need, that they're not going to be booted out of office, run out of town. Those are the types of things that are helpful, because, I mean, to a lot of us, this is important. But it's probably no more important than making sure we have a balanced budget and making sure that our schools aren't well run, and making sure that our teachers and all that are properly paid. I mean, this kind of gets lost in the noise, is what I'm telling you. And if it's an iffy thing, if it's well, I'm not really sure, what people would think. I'm not sure if it's going to cost me support or gain me support. To be honest with you, people stay away from that stuff. It's a practical reality. Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, Tennessee also agrees to Medicaid expansion, okay, which is a good example of, we don't follow other Republican-controlled states when it's not in the leadership's, purview. I can tell you that having, I think I know the study you're referring to. I think that lays the groundwork for a conversation. But I think the conversation basically I think there needs to be a legislative work group set up to look at this a little bit more intensively over the course of a year. I'm just finishing up one that, I had a bill on wireless communications last year. We met on this thing about every 2 weeks for 6 months, trying to get industry perspectives, consumer perspectives, all of it. And I think that to get to ground with a comprehensive medical use, I think something like that's got to happen. It's not going to happen in the 20 minutes that you're going to get at a committee hearing, to be honest. So my point in all of this, and if there are no other questions, I'll leave you because I don't want to use more time than I've got. But my point in all of this is, I think that given what we're seeing now, there is traction. It's headed, I think, in the direction of, decriminalization, medical use. It's not going to happen today. I can almost promise you it's certainly not going to happen tomorrow, because I'm going to be standing there. But it's organizations like this, and it's the type of studies that we've seen that really slowly but surely are moving the ball in Virginia. Are we California? Are we Oregon? Are we even District of Columbia? No, we're not. And so my colleagues are going to take a little bit more convincing going forward. That's where patience and persistence pay off. And if I leave you with any 2 words that I think matter more in this process, it is those 2, patience and persistence. I think that any balanced read tells me that this is not the horrible thing that our parents were raised to believe it was, and that we were probably at one point raised to believe it was. But by the same token, we got a long way to go to make sure that everybody agrees to that, to the extent that you can actually get some productive votes cast up there. I hope I haven't bored you. I hope I've given you some, a little bit of information, a little bit of insight that maybe you didn't have. And for what it's worth, if any of you have tomorrow afternoon free, I'll see you in courts. Thank you very much.
All right, let's take a short pause here so you can get some more caffeine. We got some snacks that are put up there, and maybe 10 minutes we'll have our next speaker. Thanks.
What year?
Excuse me, Dave.
This is a great. I think that. Thank you very much. That was okay. Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I would want. Security. How are you?
I'm Martin Elster.
At least in Virginia, you know, just slowly along. The United States invested more recently. You know, we see some very different attitudes years ago. You know, these are conversations that have been going on for decades. I think now that we see, I think, evolving, especially families. You know, those
Right here. So you got.
remember the patients. Do you think that given, I think that having So I hope it's soon. This is a great example of policy that needs to be comprehensively and objectively re-examined. I think law enforcement dollars. I mean, never. I really can't answer that. I don't know, especially with others. I was visiting South Carolina. It's not exactly what I expected, but nevertheless, I think that because we're not the first into any public policy discussion. So if we begin to take steps, I do think obviously, it's why are we not? We might be a leader, but in terms of where it's all right now. Is that all right? Quickly, question. Talking about possible loss of job. That's something that there's an explanation of very difficult cases to build on that. But it's very difficult to do. And so most of it, what happens is, in cases, even if the cases are like the thing you need done, what will is that it's never been. It will always show that you were right. But at least before you can argue, well, make a mistake. So I was did agree with service. Supposedly exploring. I even called the board out and asked them, is something that if there's a criminal back on a cursory, if your case isn't one of if you apply for a job with like federal, they will go into very. That's where it makes bubbling. Because somewhere, some way, they don't see it on your criminal. They will look. So if you really down and find it. Here's my concern. Here's my concern. I'm trying to get well. As in that I hate to say it, I think probably they're clear. But you're supposed to look at it closely because they don't want to be.
And one of the things have statutory expungement, discretionary. For me, expungement probably get you. Yeah. And that really is the problem.
That's the old special little part. Toss in there at the last minute. You're going to try to grow marijuana and extract stuff from it, but you're going to carefully exclude anybody who might have actually had an experience.
All right, let's get everyone back to their seats. We'll get going on the last part of our Virginia Cannabis Conference. Come on back in. And around people up that are out here. All right. All right, let's get back together. If we could have your attention up front, please. We're in the home stretch now, just finishing up our 2017 Cannabis Conference and Lobby Day. We're going to turn it over to Nikki here for some more, basically, housekeeping, tips, all that kind of stuff. So please welcome Nikki back.
Yay! Okay, so I just have 3 things that I want to talk about. One is June is handing out the survey that I spoke about earlier. If you can just fill that out with as much information as you're willing to provide for us to help us with feedback, we would really appreciate that. I'm going to pass these clipboards around. These are the signature petitions that I was talking about earlier. There's one for Glenn Davis, and there's one for Denver Riggleman. We would like signatures on both. The way that it has to be done, though, is it's divided up by locality. So each city has their own sheet. Each county has their own sheet, depending on what your voting district is. So if you can just write your city or your county, whichever one that you need to identify as, at the bottom of the sheet, and sign that. We have to keep them all separate. That makes it a little confusing. Believe me, us that have to do it hate it, but that's how it needs to be done. Denver Riggleman was the gentleman I was talking about. He's a gubernatorial candidate for the Republican ticket. He cannot be here because of the medical emergency within his family. We do have a surrogate to speak on his behalf. His name is Josiah Tillett. Correct? Okay, yeah, got it right. And I think that you'll find that Denver's position on cannabis is going to be something that you're going to be excited about, especially as a Republican gubernatorial candidate. So by giving your signature, this just gives him a chance to be on the ballot so that we can, again, push this issue within the Republican Party. That doesn't mean that you have to vote for him against a Democratic candidate if you're Democratic. What this does is it helps us within the Republican Party to advance this issue. So those are the 3 things that I needed to say, and I'll hand it.
Thank you, Nikki. Well, I first want to sincerely apologize to everybody here for not being Denver Riggleman. But Denver sends his regrets that he's not able to join you. He really did want to be here, but he did have a serious family medical emergency, so he does send his regrets. I will do my best Denver impersonation up front here today. So my name is Josiah Tillett. I am on staff with Denver Riggleman for governor, and I'm supporting the guy because he's the most pro-freedom candidate in the race, and that's really what I'm looking for. I'm all about individual liberty. I'm all about individual responsibility. I'm all about economic opportunity. I'm all about those freedom issues. That and this is one of those big issues that is sort of rising to the forefront of the public policy debate. So really appreciate you all being here and your attention and concern to the issue. So basically, I kind of wanted to. They called me 2 hours ago. They're like, "Hey, can you drive up to Richmond and talk about this?" And I'm like, "Okay, sure. I'll figure it out." So appreciate your patience, but. I just wanted to talk a little bit about why is this a problem? Why is marijuana illegal in the first place? What are some of the contributing factors to where we're at and the battle that we're fighting today? I think it's a one-word answer. I think it's cronyism, all right? And I know a lot of you are familiar with that. Essentially, it's the idea that a legacy industry, somebody with an established market space, will leverage through political contributions or any other method, they'll leverage political connections to create regulations that stifle competition. That's cronyism, okay? And so I think that's a big part of the issue that we're seeing with this, because what we've got for marijuana legalization, you've got two major markets that you're talking about. You've got the pharmaceutical industries. They have a financial interest in reducing competition, in eliminating competition from the medicinal side of the marijuana legalization issue. They don't want it legal because it protects their market share, protects their bottom line. Okay, and so you've got a big obstacle there with essentially the influence that the pharmaceutical industry and the lobby has with the Virginia General Assembly, with Washington, D.C., and I think that's a big part of the reason why for so long this has been an issue where you've got prohibition. Denver, he's a military veteran. He's been overseas with the Air Force, and he's very cognizant of the fact that our fighting men and women, when they come back, often they're dealing with serious physical, emotional, or mental trauma and pain that they have to deal with from what they've seen, what they've gone through over there on the battlefields, and he absolutely does not want to, take any medicinal options off the table as far as the relief and the self-medication that those servicemen and women should be able to have access to. So as far as the medical uses, that's something that we definitely want to look at some policy solutions going forward that would be able to make those available. And I'm glad that there have been some steps taken in the last couple of sessions in Richmond to start moving the ball on that forward. There's some good progress being made, and I had people tell me a couple of years ago, it's never going to happen in Virginia. It's never going to happen. So there's too many conservatives saying, oh, it's the devil's weed or whatever. It's never going to happen. Well, I think it can happen, and I think it's starting to happen. So it's good stuff. Denver's brother served 6 months on marijuana charges. This is something where he's seen kind of the consequences of prohibition. It's a personal thing for him. He realizes it has real life implications. This prohibition that it really messes up someone's life, because then you've got this vicious cycle of you go to prison and you get out and you don't have your driver's license and you got a record and you got all this other stuff you got to deal with, and you can't escape out of it. It's so he's very cognizant of that. He's got it's personal for him, and something that he's very aware of. He's not ignorant of a lot of these indirect or I don't know. I'd like to assume that politicians mean the best. I'd like to assume that they have good intentions when they pass a bill like this, but it has real implications for people's lives when you say this is illegal and we will put you in jail. That has real implications, and I personally, as someone who leans libertarian, my personal beliefs, I don't want to put anybody in jail for anything short of actually harming their fellow man. That's just what I believe, So, I was glad to see, so what we need to work for is a lot of criminal justice reform as it pertains to this issue. And I was happy to see there are some bills introduced in this session in Richmond. Like I think there was one for basically reducing the circumstances under which you can lose your driver's license for a marijuana conviction, and that's excellent. And I called Denver. I said, I just want to make sure that I don't say anything I'm not supposed to say up here. I said, you'd sign that bill, right? He's like, well, yeah. Why wouldn't I? So there you have it. Just as an example of something that Denver, as governor, he would sign it, he would support it, and that's the sort of reform that we want to see going forward. Everyone is familiar with the idea of pretense stops, right? Your taillight's broken, you got something going on with your car or whatever, you get pulled over, maybe you're not wearing your seatbelt. You get pulled over, so it's a legal pretense. It's a legal pretense to temporarily detain you and attempt to gain probable cause to execute a search. what are they searching for? They're not searching to see if you have any extra donuts. They're searching for marijuana most of the time. And why are they searching for marijuana? And it's because we've got this little bugaboo called civil asset forfeiture. And so we've got a serious criminal justice reform issue here where we've got essentially policing for profit. And it's an issue where, even as someone who came from the Republican Party, I'm in the Republican Party, I'm around a lot of conservatives, I have very conservative beliefs myself. I find myself agreeing more with the ACLU than anybody else on the issue of civil asset forfeiture. And, they say politics makes strange bedfellows. Well, it's definitely true. So, I appreciate the work that they do on that issue. But we need some serious reform to ensure that, individuals that have not been convicted don't have to go back to court and fight and spend half of the money they're going to get back anyway, or sometimes more money than they're going to get back just to regain their assets. This is a serious problem. So these are some of the, kind of the common sense reforms that it's like, why we really need to get somewhere with this. And we need someone in that executive position in Richmond who is willing to, entertain those ideas, who's willing to kind of host that discussion and push that issue. It's got to happen through the legislature. It has to. And I'm glad that we had, Glenn Davis and Steve Heretick here today to talk about the legislative side of making this happen. But when it's all said and done, the governor's got to sign the bills. And so, that's where we want to come in and be of assistance in that way. But there's another side of the cronyism that I think contributes to the prohibition in this, and it's you've got alcohol, you've got tobacco, you've got a lot of other substances, mind altering, whatever you want to call them, and my personal favorite vice is whiskey. I mean, that's just me, but they have, much like the pharmaceutical lobby on the medicinal side, they have a vested financial interest in making sure that they don't have competition from marijuana on the recreational side. And so I think if you go back and you kind of connect the dots on, again, where's the influence coming from that's pushing the legislators to keep these regulations in place, I think you'll find that it's often tied to those with a financial stake in making sure that there is not a level playing field for these substances to be out there on the market. And honestly, my personal belief, again, I think marijuana is less dangerous than alcohol or tobacco. All right, just my that's just what I think. Now, and again, I prefer whiskey myself, but that's my own thing. And so, talking about cronyism, that's a big part of the reason why Denver got in the race for governor. And so I just kind of wanted to give you a picture of what he's doing here. So Denver owns Silverback Distillery in Afton, just west of Charlottesville. So he makes liquor, he distills liquor, he and his wife. And but even as he's someone that's in that industry, that's trying to make money selling liquor, he supports that level playing field. He supports that free competition, that free exchange in the market. And he's actually been fighting cronyism of his own in a couple of different ways. So he had, basically, right now, if he sells you a bottle of liquor out of his distillery, he's paying 54% in taxes. And he's like, well, that's ridiculous. That's highway robbery. I'm going to get this changed. Well, he goes to the legislature, and they were like, well, no, we can't, support your bills to reform this because we've got the Beer and Wine Distributors Associations gave us a lot of money and told us to vote no. So we're fighting on that front. That's actually where I got to know him, was helping push some of those bills through. And we've got, on the other side, we've got property rights issues where Dominion Power was trying to come through his property. You gotta bear in mind, he actually takes the water off his property and uses it to make his liquor, right? They wanted to put a pipeline through his property, 42-inch natural gas pipeline, and they wanted to reroute his river in order to put this pipeline through, and they wanted to cut a nice big swath through his hunting grounds, his woods, and they told him he had no choice in the matter. And he decided to make a choice. There's always a choice. So he decided to fight. He said, we've got this cronyism, we've got these moneyed interests that are trying to steamroll people. You got two choices. You can fight or you can run. He ain't a runner. He doesn't like to run. So he decided to buck up and just start fighting. So that's what he's for. That's why he's in the race for governor. It's to fight cronyism. It's to stand up for the little guy. It's to promote that economic opportunity, promote that free enterprise, and just to promote liberty as broadly as possible. So I want to steer you guys to our website. If you have any questions, the platform is up there on the website. It's denverforgovernor.com. And if you want to contact the campaign, there's a contact form there, or you can email me. It's Josiah, Josiah, at denverforgovernor.com. If you have any questions, we would love to get back to you on that. I don't want to really take a whole lot of questions right now because I don't want to misrepresent the guy up here. I can't really speak unequivocally since I'm not Denver. So I would hate to misrepresent him in any way. But please contact the campaign if you have questions, and we'd love to get back to you and see how we can work together on this. Denver as governor would love to bring groups like this to the table and pound out what we can work forward with on some public policy. What are the reforms that we need to make? Tell me where the problems are, and actually work out some stuff that we can drive forward. So, that's something that a Denver Riggleman administration would like to do. We'd like to bring NORML to the table. We'd like to bring all of you who are here contributing your thoughts and beliefs and expertise. We'd like to have that debate. We'd like to have that dialogue, and we think you guys deserve it. So thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I'll hang around for a bit and love to talk to you all. Thanks.
Okay, who's buying the book for Denver? Thank you. Will you send Michelle afterwards? Get that payment from me. Here you go. To share that with you. Also, Riggleman. Okay. And also, I apologize. I sometimes speak too quickly. So I'll try to slow down. The instructions for the signature sheet, not everybody understood those clearly enough, so we might have to send them back around for some of you. I can only have people within the same voting precinct on each page. So if you're from, like for me, I'm from Stanton, so I have to put Stanton at the bottom, but somebody that lives in my county, Augusta County, needs to put theirs on another sheet and put Augusta County. So it goes by your voting precinct. So I'll send those back around, and if you see that you've signed on the wrong sheet, if you can sign a new one, I apologize for that confusion. It is complicated. Believe me, it's complicated. To collect these signatures, we are required to collect 10,000 signatures before either one of these candidates can be on the Republican ballot. So that's how this is useful, and thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. So.
All right, according to our schedule, I think we're at our designated break time. Is that correct? And then we'll come back when? About 15 minutes and wrap things up for the day. So let's take a quick break, get some more goodies. We've also got the surveys we want to make sure. And don't forget, you still have the silent auction going on in that other area. There's some really cool stuff there, so check it out.
Last session.
Yeah.
Happened to this bad. It's in a crocodile pit. Yeah, right. Maybe it's the sharks with laser beams. Oh, you're heading back tonight? Hey, maybe. I could just limit one person in the General Assembly. It used to be Bryce Williams, now don't change. You don't think just a parade of elements and stuff would have an effect eventually?
Okay. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, at the tone, the time will be 4:20. Beep. Let's get back to our chairs. We got a few last things to take care of here for our lobby day. We're going to get some basics on what we'll be doing tomorrow as far as talking to the delegates and the senators out there. So get your beverage, get yourself a seat, and we'll get things started. Sorry. No, just saying, ready to go. All right, let's turn things over here to Duane, who's got some slides for you on our lobby day. Duane?
Hey. Hi, guys. I'm Duane Ludwig. I'm from Northern Virginia, and I've been working with NORML in Virginia for about 4 years now. One thing I realized as we were doing all our stuff today is that we didn't really properly introduce NORML to you. And a lot of you, have been involved or come to meetings, but a lot of you I'm seeing for the first time, which is very exciting. And I want to keep seeing you guys, and I want to tell you what we do and how you can be involved. So I just put together some slides this morning, and I thought I'd share them with you, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So first of all, here's a map of our state, our lovely state. And what I did was I put a little pin everywhere that there's somebody here from. That doesn't sound right. Anyways, this is all of us, okay? And as you can see, as you might expect, there's quite a few from Nova, quite a few from the Hampton Roads, Norfolk area, a few from Richmond, and then a smattering elsewhere. But there's certain places where you, oops, I got a There you go. Areas like this, we don't have anyone from here and not too many people from out here. I mean, granted, there's not a lot of people out there, but that just kind of shows you kind of where we are today at this conference. And the next slide, I'm going to show you where Virginia NORML has chapters where you can meet up with like-minded individuals and make plans to change the laws. So we've got a chapter in Nova that's very active. We meet every month. In fact, all these chapters meet every month, I believe. We got a chapter in Culpeper that's relatively new, and they're doing great. So about a year they've been around. Let's hear it for Culpeper. Harrisonburg has a chapter. Scott's running that, making things happen out in the land of the Dukes. Jefferson area NORML is the Charlottesville environs. And they've been a very solid chapter. We got Richmond in the house somewhere. In Richmond, people? All right. And then Roanoke, which has been with us a couple years now, doing great, meeting on the 22nd of every month. And finally, down in the Hampton Roads area, we have Decriminalized Norfolk, which is more or less similar to a NORML chapter. I mean, we got the same goals. And so if you live in that area, you definitely want to talk to Cindy and figure out how you can help down there. So that's just to give you an idea of what we have going now. But what you can see is that we do have areas that are not really well represented as far as chapters go. Fredericksburg, we used to have a chapter there. It's kind of become inactive. So if anyone knows people there or lives there and want to start up a chapter, talk to us and we'll help you make it happen. The whole middle of the state is a little dry right now. So if you know folks out there, these are the parts of the states where the lawmakers are that we need to convince. So if we don't have members and activists in these areas, it makes it harder. So think about people you might know who might want to not maybe start a chapter, but at least get active and do some advocacy. So here's a quick map of the bills that we had this year, and I put a little pot leaf indicating where they're from, and blue for the Democrats, red for the Republicans, and it's a nice mix this year, which is relatively new, and that's very exciting. I put a cross through Bob Marshall's name because his bill is a study that was just written to malign marijuana and not really study it in any objective way. But he did put forth a bill with the word marijuana in it, so we'll give him credit for that. Needless to say, he's one of the people that we have to unelect. And so if you live out in the Prince William area, you know what I'm talking about. And in fact, he does have a challenger who I just learned about a couple days ago, and I think she will have I know she has a positive view of marijuana, so we can support her. That'd be very exciting. Her name is Danica Rome. Danica Rome. So she just announced within the last week or two. This may not be everyone, but this is what was on our website like a week ago or so. Okay, that's probably why. So real quick, make sure we're on the same page with regard to Virginia civics, because when you talk to other people, it's important to educate them as well, so we know what we have to do. General Assembly consists of the Senate and the House of Delegates, 40 senators, 100 delegates, and our state has lots of gerrymandering, and that's why we end up with some of these incumbents who we can never get out of office. They're basically choosing their own constituents by redistricting every 10 years. And so that's something we got to fight against in Virginia, but that's a different issue. Just want to let everyone know that it's something that makes it a little more difficult sometimes to advocate. There's a great tool that we always like to send people to called who'smy.virginiajournalassembly.gov. You can enter your address or click right where you live on this map, and it'll tell you delegate, senator, U.S. House rep, and then your two state federal senators. All their contact information is there. And so when someone asks you, well, who do I write to? You can give them that URL, and then they can figure it out for themselves, or you can help them. So every legislator has a district office near you and an office in Richmond, which is where they are during the General Assembly session for the 2 months that they're in session. So we need you to email them regularly, call them regularly, and most important, visit them. Come to their office hours, the town halls that they all have in the late December, early January timeframe and throughout the year. And then, of course, Lobby Day, which is what we're doing tomorrow. Here's a quick look of what the Senate districts look like in Virginia. As you can see, there's quite a few up in Northern Virginia because of the dense population, but it's 40 of them. And because it's not as badly gerrymandered, it's pretty evenly split currently. I mean, there's definitely some down here that you're like, what the heck's going on? So that's what I'm talking about. Here is the Virginia State Senate Majority Leader, Tommy Norman. You've heard his name several times. And these are his quotes from back in November. And this is the study that we'd really like to see performed because of his comments. It's really getting some buzz. I hope Heretick was wrong about it not getting funding, but you know how lawmakers are when they don't have enough money. The good things get skipped. House of Delegates, there's 100, so they're a lot smaller. But just an idea, like you can see how in Norfolk there's a ton. Here's the Nova region, and they're just wacky shapes. And now a few basics about Virginia NORML, in case you're not sure how we operate. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we engage in advocacy. We're not. What are we now? We used to be. Was it 4? 100 nationals. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. But the thing that is definitely true is that you can't deduct the donations, but we do need them. So please donate and get your friends to donate. If they aren't comfortable with advocating and doing all this, meeting with lawmakers, make sure they're comfortable with at least giving some money so we can continue this important work and achieve what everyone knows to be needed. The leadership is all volunteers. Nobody's getting paid in this organization. We have an executive committee, which has like the executive director, Jen Michelle. We got the communications director, which is Nikki. Ryan is the membership director currently. So that those kind of folks keep things running. We have a board of directors, about anywhere between 8 and 12 people usually, and we get together on telecons every month just to keep on top of things. But we are always in search of fresh ideas and new leaders, because it can't be the same people year in, year out. You know, some people have to take a break, and we want to give opportunities for other people to get involved. So if it's something you think you might like to do, come talk to us, come to meetings, and get involved. We'd love to have you. The focus of Virginia NORML is empowering our grassroots supporters to achieve reform, okay? And so I can't emphasize that enough. It's the citizens of the state, the people who really suffer from these laws, that we're trying to engage to change the laws. It's not like some organizations where they get huge donations and they can afford expensive lobbyists. We're not like that. We're just ordinary people learning to advocate and do it tomorrow as our main event of the year. So come to a local monthly meeting and find a way to help. We got projects, there's leadership opportunities and fundraising opportunities, and we can find something that matches your skill set, because everybody has something different to offer from whatever you do as your job or your pastimes. We can find a way to work with you and keep this thing going strong. We need to spread the activism bug, because the polling is on our side, but the lawmakers won't realize it until we get enough advocacy happening and just generate that pressure. So just one activist, doing the monthly emails and going to town halls and supporting our organization is great. But if that person can recruit 3 friends to the cause, that's 4 times emails and calls. That's a lot more people meeting face to face with these lawmakers. We can have bigger and better events. We had a great event back in October where we just kind of hung out on a farm and celebrated just freedom, and that's the kind of thing we can do because we're all on the same page with what we want, and we're all just really fun people, and it's really, I can't overstate that. And then most importantly, we got to eliminate the stigma and the taboo. And the more people talking about this, the quicker we can get rid of that and just get people talking in a common sense way and not like, am I going to get busted for talking about this? No, we got to talk about it. And then keep recruiting because we need to reach that tipping point. All right. Thanks for coming today, everyone, and taking action tomorrow. And I think we did the surveys, so I think we're good on that. Thanks for all your ideas, and we will see you soon.
Thank you very much, Duane. We appreciate that. All right, guys, final stretch. We're wrapping up with our final presentation. It's going to be a panel discussion. Originally, I was going to stand up here and bore you guys